So in this video, we're actually going to go through the 5 gotchas when setting up the hub network. This is actually going to be from my personal experience as I went through to set up the hub. There was a few items that caught me by surprise. Some of them had me scratching my head. Why would you do this? Why does it work this way? I'm going to share those with you here to make sure that you don't fall into the same traps.
Alright, so in this video, we're going to talk about the 5 gotchas of working with the hub site. These are things that I came across as how one was building up the navigation or just working with hub sites in general in the lab or, just doing skunk work. So, number one, and I have a cheat sheet over here. I got these listed out. So, number one is security, right? So, when you're building out the hub site, by default, all these site collections are going to be not exposed to everyone. So one of the things you have to remember to do is that when you go to share the site, you can share it to everyone, right? There's the everyone, but except for external users group. Go ahead and give them read access. The number one thing is make sure you uncheck the send email box, or else that's going to send this email out to everyone in the organization, which for most people is not appreciated. Your exchange team or what have you will not appreciate it. So definitely make sure you uncheck that box. I really do not know why that's on by default. I think that should be an explicit setting, but it's been there since day one. It's just always been a pet peeve, and a lot of clients and organizations really hate that option, especially when you're sharing with everyone. So once you share this out, this is what it's going to look like. So here I have a test user, and this is one of the things I highly recommend, is that you get a test user that has very limited access, more of like an everyone to really simulate the end user within your organization. Use that test account to confirm that people can access what you expect them to access. Now, as soon as I enable everyone, because all of this is search driven, either by the graph or the Microsoft Search, this is going to take some time to curate and then to propagate within the site. So it's really important that you make it accessible to them. So especially because we're not sending out the email, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just do a direct link, and I just copy that link over there. And it seems as if the user does seem to have access to some of the key information that's available. But here's the gotcha. The gotcha is I'm linking to other site collections within the hub. So for example, pay is going to link me to the human resources site collection. And as soon as you click that, they get no access. Again, this is why it's so important that once you have your intranet ready to go, and right before you pull the trigger and advertise it that is up and running, get a less privileged account. Run through each one of those links, confirm that the end user will have access, or else your help desk is going to blow up, or your access request list is going to blow up, and it's just going to be a nightmare. Now, the gotcha is, because we're dealing with the hub network, security, as you just saw, is not automatically propagated down to all the other site collections. I mean, these site collections are independent, though you're linking to them, and though they're represented within the navigation. Is not a default thing. So that's the biggest gotcha. But again, it can all be caught as long as you're testing your site with a least privileged account, so that way you can catch a lot of these gotchas beforehand. All right, so now let's just go back to our user. We have access, and we'll go and clean that up. The other gotcha is this guy right here. Now this is, I think this is just the biggest no-no that should not be enabled by default. Allow end users to create a site collection, and as I showed you before, so this is going to be a test site, right? And this user is going to be able to, and this is an end user with read-only access, right? This end user is going to be able to create a new site collection and associate it to the hub, which I think is just mind-blowing. Like, why would you do that? Like, why should that be a default setting? So your SharePoint governance policy is out the window. That would just create site collection sprawl. end users normally don't have the necessary training on how do you manage the site, how do you ensure that the information on here, how do you manage security. And then as you can see, they create the site and they're the only ones that have access to it. I mean, the owner, I think by default, they have access to it. I mean, obviously it looks like I have access to the site and I can edit and make all these changes, but it's associated to the hub. Thank goodness I can't link, create, modify the navigation, right? And that's one thing to keep in mind. Though you're a site collection associated to the hub, you have to be on that main site in order to manage the navigation. So here I am. I'm logged in as, is this Ashley? So I'm logged in as Ashley, and I have read-only access to the main site of the hub. I'm given the option to create a site. I can come in here and just create as many sites as I want to until I'm blue in the face. I just think this is probably, from a governance standpoint, just probably the worst setting ever. Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough that every time you create a team site, you get a site collection built in the back end, and managing that, and because these things become stale, right? I mean, this is someone clicking around like, oh, what does this do? Oh, team site. Oh, okay, blah, 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 blah. And then hit new, and then all of a sudden, okay, now I got 2 site collections because I was curious. So in order to... Let me get off that bandwagon. So in order to stop that, the good news is you can't stop it, but you have to be aware of it, which is why we're shooting this video. Now to stop that, what you want to do is go to your site admin, right? There's a couple ways to do it. And there's a setting to where in the SharePoint admin, there's a setting to where you can tell it to only these users can associate sites to the hub, and that stops the bleeding a little bit. And I'll explain why I say a little bit. So now if I go to the main console, let me just search on main. I'm trying to find that main site collection within the hub. So if I click on this guy, the setting is actually when you register or when you establish the site as a hub. So what you can do, you can unregister the hub setting for that site. You get a warning that says, okay, if you unregister any site associated to this, it's going to be disassociated to the hub, which makes sense because the hub doesn't exist. Now, if I come up here and hit register as the hub, this setting right here is really important. Now, you kind of have to understand a little bit what's going on behind the scenes. So what I was looking for is trying to find like the owner group for the main site collection. Is that such a thing? Well, you probably should have maybe a site collection admin group, right? Or a SharePoint admin group for admins within the organization. Maybe those 3 or 4 folks who are just going to be managing these sites and all this other good stuff. So you want to go ahead and add their names here. And just say, okay, well, I'll put Madison Hatmaker in there. And then here, I just want to give it the name. Main console. Now this does not change the name of the site at all. This is just the representation of this hub in that drop down, and then they hit save. Now the good news is, you know, when we had to break the hub and we had to reestablish the hub, now allow us to set the people who we want to have that create site option. By doing that, we got the warning that says any site associated with that is no longer going to be associated. But I know human resources, as an example, is one associated. And as soon as you reestablish the hub, this human resource site was reestablished with the network, which is good, right? Because we had to, in order to undo that, we have to disassociate and all this other good stuff. Now, there's a PowerShell script. I found this on the Google search that there is a PowerShell script to where you can do the exact same thing, but just doing it through the UI for me is more comfortable because one, I see exactly what I'm doing, then I can easily go and verify it, and that's just me, right? And now we're good to go. So now if I go back to this main console site, right, I still have my name. That didn't change the name at all. And now if I swing this back over to where I am Ashley now, let me just cancel that, hit refresh, and now the option to create a site is gone. And that's another thing. I mean, that option is just like right there. Like, it's not even hidden. It's like create. I mean, it's such a horrible setting. Now, I said that that's only stopping the bleeding for a little bit. And I say that because if they go to the SharePoint, right, dashboard, I really don't know the proper term for this screen right here. And then there's another create site to here. They can just still go and create team sites, communication sites, and all this other good stuff. They just won't be able to associate it to the hub, which is fine, but you still want to kill that, and that's another setting in the, I'm not going to show you here, but if you go back to that SharePoint admin screen and under settings, there's an option to disable self-service site creation or something along those lines. Okay, that's the other gotcha. So the hub site creation and the hub site association for an end user with read-only access, gotcha number 2. All right, so let's look at number 3. So number 3 is we got personalization here, right? So if you look at this home page, towards the bottom here, we have things like my documents, documents that they modified, my recent sites, documents that they visit, sites that they're visiting, and so on. So if I go here and go back to, and that's another thing. You want to make these things discoverable. Let's see, sites demo 3. So if I go here as this end user, Ashley, again, read-only access, this is pretty ghostly, right? So my formatting of the page kind of gets out of whack because personalization is in there, but that current user does not have enough data. So that's just one of those things to be aware of. So, if you're doing personalization front and center, I really don't have an answer to this, right? Because I don't know, like in that web part, I didn't check actually. In that web part, let me check now live. Get myself in trouble. I'm going off script here. In that web part, what I'm looking at, it's like, can you, yeah, so there's some options here. Can you change, yeah, so maybe add like recent sites or something like that, like recently added. And that would kind of hopefully fill up some content for this current user. And maybe like not necessarily this month, but earlier this year maybe. Or last year, I don't know. I don't know the right scope, right, to where you have enough data. So let's just do that. Recently added from last year, and kill this out, publish this up, and now let's bring over Ashley, hit refresh, and let's see. But I think that may be, ooh. Ashley, do you not have access to this? Interesting. All right. Maybe that's a search thing, but no. These files should already be indexed. Maybe it's just a lot of files that are not public to the end user. But maybe that's the piece right there. Maybe it's a combination of, with that filtering option, start off with the personalization stuff, and then kind of put your fillers in there with maybe recently added documents or whatever the case may be. So that way this area doesn't seem so ghostly. I don't know why that's not popping up. But again, personalization is really, really cool. I think it's going to get even better when the new modern audience targeting feature gets implemented or gets deployed. It's just one of those things. Again, if you're testing with a least privileged account, a brand new account, you can kind of get a sense of, okay, before this user really kind of get going and touching a lot of things and reading a lot of documents or visiting sites, what would that home page look like, and then just plan for that accordingly. All right, so number 4, this is this may just be a pre-release issue because again, I'm set up for targeted release. This navigation, this footer navigation, is odd, and I landed to a different site. Right? This is weird. What? Oh, I landed on a different site. Sorry about that. I have 2 sites that look almost exactly the same. All right, so let me do this. Let me do demo 3. Sorry about that. So that was my video 1 site. All right, so if I go to here, so maybe if I go in here and modify the right web part, we can probably see that setting change for Ashley. All right, so another thing that I noticed, like this navigation here at the bottom, one, it's not a mega menu, so you can't do these fancy layouts with headers and all this other good stuff, which I think it makes sense, but I don't know, it's fine with the way it is. But the gotcha is when I go to another site collection in this hub, the navigation didn't carry over. So it's like, is that really a home page or the main entry page site collection only setting? I don't know. So it was kind of weird. So if you go into change the look for this particular site navigation site collection, and then go down to the footer and then say edit navigation, you can create your own navigation, which is odd. It seemed like that footer navigation is similar to global navigation, should just be global for the footer, right? So I don't know. I think this is probably something that they're working on, I guess, or maybe there's an option that says use the same navigation as as the hub, or what. But this is odd. I don't know why the navigation would not be global and the same for every site within the hub. It just seems like that makes sense. So that is something to be aware of. But again, that feature is not for GA. Maybe that's something I can check user voice, and maybe that's something someone's reported and they said, oh yeah, that's a miss, we're working on it, yada yada yada. But just be aware that as of right now, the footer only applies to their independent per site collection, even though they're part of the same hub, which is odd. It should be global. All right, so the next one, and this is more of a planning piece, right? So we built this hub. A lot of organizations, and you're probably working on this as well, where a lot of departments within the organization have already using team sites. So you're going to have a lot of departments or these like these subcommittees or what have you leveraging these team sites. The one thing that you want to be careful of is not to duplicate several sites, right? You don't want to go down the path of I have a Microsoft Teams site, but I also have another site for the same department, unless it's warrant, right? You shouldn't go down that path by default. You really have to justify why a particular, like HR, for example, HR is probably a bad example, because there I can easily justify two sites, because they have one where they're communicating out to the organization and they're pushing a lot of information out there. That warrants a communication site that's separate from their Microsoft Teams site, which is going to create a SharePoint site collection that they use for internal use only within their department, and maybe security trim it even within their departments to separate, administrators from payroll or from managers and all this other good stuff. So that I can justify. But for legal, maybe a traditional department, a department that traditionally does not communicate out to the organization in that fashion, though, and here's the rub, they may have documents that they want to be published out to the organization. So maybe there's legal templates, maybe there's standard contracts and all this other good stuff. So they're baking those in their Microsoft Teams site. So let me just bounce over here to Teams. And here you're going to see a lot of wedding stuff, because that's what, this fictitious site is all about. So if I go to files here and then open up in SharePoint, here, I have a perfectly fine Microsoft Modern Communication site that sits under that Microsoft Teams site. There's no need to really duplicate this, right? Now, this is a private group, meaning that any news, announcements, quick links, documents, and all this other good stuff is going to be internal within my legal department. You just say legal, ignore the wedding label. My legal department, right? Or even my project team. So, if you take weddings as an example, this is a internal wedding department that prep, services or products and all this other stuff for brides and grooms. And there's only certain information that they want to communicate out, because, a lot of their weddings that they're managing are internal department only. There's no need to communicate out a particular wedding to the entire organization. So they're kind of working privately. And then this is, if you look at Microsoft or Ignite conference, you hear a lot of like Jeff and all, all the executives or program managers at Microsoft dealing with SharePoint talk about the inner communication loop and the outer communication loop. So the inner communication loop is all within your department, within your team, usually what the Microsoft Teams is really designed to do. And your outer is what your communication teams or sites are really designed to do, to communicate out. Now, you're going to have that scenario to where, one, I'm internal, but I still want to be able to navigate to the hub and all those sites that are on my main intranet. So here, you just easily go to site information. No, change the look. Nope, sorry, site information. I always get those two mixed up. Go to site information. You have your hub association piece here. Because I am the SharePoint admin and the owner of the site, I can do that. I can go ahead and add this, or else because we locked this down, this will have to be like a help desk ticket or something like that to associate this site to the hub. Now, when I do this, and maybe this is why the security is not automatically propagated down, I didn't change the security of the site. This is still a private group, and they can still safely work and feel confident that the information that they're putting in this site and the team site is still only exposed to their internal department and not to the rest of the organization. They're fine. But the scenario that comes up is that even in legal, right, if I go back to that scenario, I have presentation decks or templates and all this other good stuff that I want to share out to the organization. Okay, fine. So what you would do is do what I've done here. I created a separate library, right? Went into that library settings, go into the permissions of that library, and broke inheritance. This is an old SharePoint managing security type technique. Break the inheritance, add everyone, read-only access only to that library, maintain my membership and owner access to that library so members and owners of this Microsoft Teams site can still come in here and manage this information. So now if I look at Ashley, she can come in here and search on, oh yeah, what is the Bright deck or the standard Bright deck, Bright presentation deck? And this is going to be, okay, so that's fine. Now this is managed by this public library with this Microsoft Teams site. This is that same deck that she have access to, pops up in her search. She have everything security trim. We're good to go. Now the workflow, and this is something I think I really want to touch on in the next video. This is something I really want to touch on in the next video, is that a lot of those scenarios of I'm working privately internally within my group, but I have documents, policies, and all this stuff that I need to share out to the organization. Deshaun, you just said don't duplicate a site just to share a few files in the example of legal, because traditionally I'm not a communication out org type department. How do I handle that scenario? Well, what you would see here, what I've done, if you go into this Microsoft Teams site, is it on the general? Did I lost it? Did I lose it? Oh, I have this public library, which is the same public library that you see on their communication site. And now I can work privately. So if I come in here and create this Word document and just say sample private, right, and hit create. And what I want to do is really shoot a video on all these different scenarios, especially in Microsoft Teams, because I see so many people are putting way too much thought into are overthinking and duplicating a lot of content, which at the end of the day is just going to create a lot of unnecessary site collections, right? So here's this document here. This document is private because it's not in this public library. But then, so the scenario is that, okay, we have a new policy that we need to work out. I have 5, 6, 7 people within my department working on and locking this policy down. Once this policy goes through the final approval and is ready for organization consumption, meaning I need to push it out, then this guy will be done. Maybe we'll put a new name on it. We select it, hit move, and then move this guy over to our public library. And now everyone in the organization will be able to consume it. So if I go over here back to Ashley, she's looking at this deck, and we know that anytime you open the Office document within the browser, you can easily link to the library that document is hosted in. So she could click into public library within this wedding site, aka legal, and that private document that we just finished putting the final I's and T's crossed and got the final approval, we push that over, and now that's available. She has access to it. She can click on it, and it's good to go. And I really love this structure, and we'll go in like how do you set this up, the configuration that's needed, which is super simple. You just have to understand the security model, and this is where your traditional SharePoint managing permissions really comes into play. But this is a really simple process, and you notice that I didn't have to go out there and say, oh, let me share with the entire organization and all the other good stuff, because this library assume anything pushed into the library is automatically going to get the necessary permissions to make this available to the organization. I can also come in here and treat this like anything else. I can create different folder structures, 1, 2, 3, simple 1, 2, 3. Hit create. So that way, if I want to get organized, I can get organized and identify different areas. Again, back to Ashley. She comes in here. She can click on that folder. She has access to it. No access denied. Everything is managed for you automatically. In the next video, let's go through that process. Let's go through a lot of those different scenarios. If you have questions, if you have scenarios on how do I get this information from Teams, what is the right document flow or document process, let's brainstorm on that. Give me some ideas that you want to see in the next video. Just drop them in the comment section and I will address them. So that's it. That was number 5. Is the warning there is do not duplicate your site structure or setup just because you want to share information out. Now, I'm kind of hesitant. Sorry, I was a little distracted there because I added that site to the navigation, but for the user who does not have access to that site, they're not getting the navigation. Ew, interesting. Okay, gotcha. Number 6. That's odd. All right. Anyway. But yeah, so that's it. Again, Hub network in closing, I would say the Hub network is really cool. I think it's a must, especially if you're going to go flat with your navigate your site structure, your sites. You know, you're not going to create subsites. You want to keep everything as a site collection. I think it just makes managing security that much straightforward, that much. Take the guesswork out of that, which is the important piece, right? You don't want to be guessing access to confidential documents and make a mistake and expose that when you really do not want to expose that. So that's it for this video. Again, in the comment section, leave me information on what you want to see in the next video when it comes to Teams and Hub site communication, a lot of those different flows as far as like creating documents and all the other good stuff, maybe interacting with your OneDrive, what some of the gotchas there or what I've seen as best practices to kind of keep people working smoothly and seamlessly with security in mind. All right. Talk to you soon and take care.